Have you ever felt a heaviness inside you? Like an invisible weight you've been carrying your whole life? A feeling that no matter what you do, it's never enough. As if some part of you has been quietly telling you that you are flawed or unworthy. That weight often comes from messages we absorbed long ago, in childhood, and it can quietly shape the way we see ourselves and the world. Most of the time, we don't even notice it, but it influences how we think, how we make decisions, and how we respond to the world around us. It can appear as self-doubt, anxiety, perfectionism, or a quiet sense of not measuring up, even when everything on the outside seems fine. These feelings often begin in the earliest years of life. Childhood is when we are learning who we are, absorbing messages from our parents, teachers, and peers. A critical word, a harsh glance, or a moment when we felt unseen can leave a mark. These experiences can quietly teach us that we are not enough, that something is wrong with who we are. Over time, these small moments can grow into a persistent inner voice that shapes our self-image, our confidence, and our choices. Carl Jung described the shadow as the parts of ourselves that we hide or reject, often because they were not accepted by others. Within the shadow often lies shame, the feeling that something is fundamentally wrong with who we are. Shame is different from guilt. Guilt tells us we did something wrong. Shame tells us that we are wrong. Unlike guilt, which can fade once we make amends, shame often lingers, influencing our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in ways we may not even notice. The first step toward healing is noticing it. Recognizing that shame exists does not mean blaming anyone or rewriting the past. It simply means becoming aware of the ways these old beliefs have shaped us. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. By turning our attention to the parts of ourselves we have hidden or denied, we begin to understand them. And with understanding comes the possibility of freedom. Facing shame can feel scary. It thrives in secrecy, so shining a light on it can feel vulnerable or uncomfortable. Our minds naturally resist it, protecting us by pushing the feelings away or distracting us. But avoidance keeps the weight in place. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with heavy stones you inherited long ago. Each stone represents a belief that you are not enough, a story you absorbed as a child. The first step is noticing the weight. The next step is gently examining each stone and understanding where it came from. The final step is putting the stones down and realizing they do not define you. In this video, we will explore exactly how to do that. We will look at where shame and guilt come from, how to identify the triggers that keep them alive, and practical steps to release them. We will explore how to reconnect with your inner self. Speak kindly to the younger parts of you, and integrate the hidden aspects of your psyche into a whole and authentic self. This is not about perfection or fixing yourself. It is about understanding, acceptance, and self-compassion. Shame may have been with you for years, quietly shaping your thoughts and choices, but it does not have to control you any longer. The act of noticing it, facing it, and understanding it is an act of courage. It is the first step toward freedom, toward self-awareness, and toward discovering your own strength and authenticity. This is where our journey begins, with the willingness to see yourself honestly. Meet your inner world with curiosity and kindness, and take the first steps toward letting go of what no longer serves you. Today, we begin that journey together. Chapter 1. Understanding toxic shame and guilt. Before we can begin to release shame and guilt, it's important to truly understand what they are and how they differ, because many of us confuse the two, and that confusion can keep the weight inside us heavier than it needs to be. Guilt and shame may feel similar at first. They are both uncomfortable emotions that signal something is wrong, but they operate very differently inside us. Guilt is about what we did. It is tied to actions, to choices we made that we regret. When we feel guilty, it is possible to say, "I made a mistake, but I can learn from it. I can make amends. I can do better next time." Guilt can be uncomfortable, yes, but it is finite. It points to behavior, not to identity. Shame, on the other hand, is far deeper and far more insidious. Shame is about who we are. It is the feeling that there is something inherently wrong inside us, something defective or unworthy. It whispers that we are not good enough, not lovable, not capable, and it often starts in childhood, when we were most vulnerable and impressionable. These feelings are rarely born from a single moment. They often develop from repeated experiences, like criticism from a parent, teasing from peers, or subtle messages that our natural selves were unacceptable. Over time, these messages get absorbed into our identity. Without awareness, we start to carry them as truths, as if they define us. Shame doesn't just affect our emotions. It affects our behaviors and the way we move through life. It can show up as self-sabotage, procrastination, perfectionism, or constant fear of judgment. It can make us avoid opportunities, second-guess ourselves, or hide parts of who we are. Unlike guilt, which can be addressed with action, shame feels inescapable. It sits in the background, a constant companion that shapes how we think, how we feel, and even how we interpret the world around us. Carl Jung talked about the shadow as the parts of ourselves that we reject or deny, the aspects we hide because they were judged, criticized, or considered unacceptable. Shame is deeply connected to the shadow. It lives in the places we have pushed away, in the parts of ourselves we are afraid to see or admit. These hidden parts are not evil or wrong. They are simply human. But because we have rejected them, they carry pain. Bringing awareness to shame is about recognizing these parts of ourselves without judgment, about noticing that the critical voice inside us often comes from absorbed experiences, not from reality. Understanding shame also means understanding its subtle nature. Often, we don't even notice when shame shows up. It can appear as a tension in our body, a sudden feeling of embarrassment, or a quiet inner voice criticizing us. It can influence our decisions without us realizing why. The first step is to become aware of how shame operates in your life, to start noticing when it appears and how it feels. Awareness doesn't make shame worse. Awareness is the doorway to freedom. It's also important to understand that shame and guilt are not weaknesses or failures. They are human experiences. Everyone experiences them at some point, and many of us carry them for years without realizing it. The difference is whether we let them control our lives or whether we choose to bring them into consciousness and work through them with compassion and understanding. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When we bring shame into awareness, we take the first step toward freedom. Understanding toxic shame and guilt is not just an intellectual exercise. It is about feeling, noticing, and naming what has been hidden for years. It is about recognizing that guilt can guide us to change our actions, while shame points to the parts of ourselves that have been wounded, often unnecessarily. And most importantly, it is about beginning to separate ourselves from those old messages. The voice that says we are not enough is not the truth about who we are. It is a learned story, and learning stories can be unlearned. In the next step of this journey, we will explore how to identify the triggers that keep shame alive, the specific experiences, memories, and patterns that continue to feed it. But first, it is essential to sit with this understanding, to allow yourself to feel it, and to realize that noticing shame is not a failure. It is the beginning of reclaiming your life from the unconscious weight you have carried for too long. Chapter 2. Identifying Childhood. Shame Triggers. The next step in this journey is understanding where shame begins and how it continues to influence us. For most of us, the roots of shame are planted in childhood, often in ways that felt small at the time, but left a lasting mark. Childhood is a time of deep sensitivity. We are learning not only who we are, but also how the world responds to us. And in that process, moments of criticism, rejection, or neglect can create a sense that something is wrong with who we are. These experiences do not need to be traumatic in the extreme sense. Even subtle moments, a parent's frustrated tone, a teacher's impatience, or a peer's teasing, can send the message that our natural selves are unacceptable. Over time, those small seeds of shame grow into beliefs that quietly guide how we see ourselves. Shame triggers are unique for each person, but there are common threads. Some of us were criticized or judged by adults in ways that made us feel we were not measuring up. Others were ignored or unseen, leaving us to feel unworthy of attention or love. Bullying and social rejection at school can teach us that our differences are flaws. Sometimes, children internalize messages that the world is unsafe, that expressing emotions is wrong, or that their needs are inconvenient or burdensome. These early experiences form patterns in our minds that shape the way we perceive ourselves even decades later. As adults, these childhood experiences often manifest in subtle ways. You may notice that you avoid certain situations or opportunities because deep down, you feel you will fail. You may struggle with perfectionism, pushing yourself harder and harder to prove your worth. You may find yourself self-sabotaging, holding back, or criticizing yourself when no one else is watching. These behaviors are not random. They are echoes of childhood messages that have been stored in the subconscious. They are your psyche's way of protecting you from experiencing the shame you felt before, even if it no longer serves you. One of the most powerful tools in understanding your shame is reflection. Ask yourself questions like, when do I feel less than? What situations make me overly self-conscious, anxious, or defensive? Are there patterns that repeat in my life, in my thoughts, or in my behaviors? These reflective questions are not about blaming anyone. They are about noticing patterns that have quietly shaped your life. Often, It is only by identifying these patterns that we can begin to untangle the old messages from the truth about who we are. It's also important to recognize that shame often attaches itself to vulnerability. Any situation where we feel exposed, judged, or different can trigger that old sense of unworthiness. A simple comment, a glance, or a perceived failure can awaken the echoes of childhood experiences. By identifying these triggers, you begin to see that the feelings are not about who you are in this moment. They are responses rooted in the past, old recordings of moments when you felt criticized, rejected, or unseen. Identifying these triggers can feel uncomfortable. It can bring up emotions we have tried to avoid for years. But discomfort is not a sign that we are failing. On the contrary, it is evidence that awareness is growing. By noticing these patterns, by tracing them back to their origins, we create space to respond differently. We begin to see that the shame we feel now is not a reflection of reality. It is a story we have been carrying, often unconsciously, for many years. This process is gentle, not forceful. It is about noticing, reflecting, and naming the experiences that shaped your sense of self. It is about recognizing that childhood shame does not define you. It is something you carry, but it is separate from who you truly are. By understanding these triggers, you start to reclaim power over the parts of your inner world that have been operating on autopilot for decades. The more we explore these triggers, the more we begin to see the patterns that keep shame alive. And once we see them, we are ready to move toward facing the challenges of letting go, embracing the shadow, and integrating the parts of ourselves we have hidden for too long. This awareness is the bridge between unconscious patterns and conscious self-understanding, the doorway to the healing that comes next. Chapter 3. Challenges in letting go of toxic shame. Letting go of toxic shame is rarely simple. In fact, it can feel like one of the most difficult journeys we ever undertake, because shame is deeply rooted and highly protective. It has spent years, sometimes decades, shaping the way we see ourselves and how we interact with the world. That means the process of releasing it often brings up resistance, fear, and discomfort, even as we recognize that it no longer serves us. One of the first challenges is the fear of vulnerability. Shame thrives in secrecy. The very act of noticing it, naming it, or facing it can feel unsafe, as if exposing ourselves will invite judgment or rejection. It is natural to want to hide the parts of ourselves that feel flawed or unworthy, because we learned early on that these parts were not acceptable. But healing requires turning toward that fear, even when it feels uncomfortable. Vulnerability is not a weakness. It is a doorway to understanding, and stepping through it takes courage. Another challenge is internal resistance. The beliefs we have carried for so long can be incredibly persuasive. Deep down, the mind often wants to protect us from pain, so it may push back against efforts to release shame. You might notice self-sabotaging thoughts, excuses, or doubts that prevent you from fully engaging in healing practices. You might question whether you deserve relief, or wonder if change is even possible. This resistance is normal. It is a sign that you are encountering something meaningful, something that has shaped your life in profound ways. The key is patience. The process of change is gradual, and setbacks do not mean failure. They mean you are working with deeply ingrained patterns that have been in place for many years. External triggers are another obstacle, even when we are committed to healing. Interactions with critical or insensitive people can reignite old shame. A passing comment, a perceived judgment, or a moment of rejection can awaken feelings that feel as strong as they did in childhood. These triggers are reminders that the work of releasing shame is ongoing. It is not a one-time event. Healing is not about creating a life without discomfort, but about learning to navigate life with awareness and compassion, even when old patterns are stirred. Slow progress is another challenge that many people underestimate. Society often encourages quick fixes and immediate results, but the mind and heart do not work that way. Releasing toxic shame takes time, repetition, and consistent self-reflection. There will be days when it feels like nothing is changing, when old patterns resurface, and when it seems like the burden is as heavy as ever. This is part of the process. Growth is rarely linear. It is important to honor your journey, celebrate small victories, and recognize that each moment of awareness, no matter how subtle, is a step forward. Self-compassion is essential when facing these challenges. It is easy to become frustrated, to blame ourselves for not moving faster, or to judge ourselves for struggling with feelings we have carried for decades. But the work of healing shame requires gentleness. It requires creating a safe internal environment where we can observe old patterns without harsh criticism. As Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. That pain is not a sign that we are failing. It is evidence that we are encountering something that needs attention and care. Support is another critical factor. Facing shame alone can feel overwhelming. So having people who provide understanding, guidance, or simply a non-judgmental presence can make a profound difference. Whether it's a therapist, a mentor, or a trusted friend, sharing your experience can reduce the intensity of shame and help you practice new ways of relating to yourself. In short, letting go of toxic shame is challenging because it asks us to confront what we have avoided for years. It asks us to sit with vulnerability, face resistance, manage triggers, navigate slow progress, and do all of this with patience and compassion. But these challenges, as difficult as they are, also point to the depth of the work. They reveal that beneath the shame lies the potential for transformation. By meeting these challenges, we begin to create the conditions for lasting self-awareness, freedom, and the ability to live more fully in alignment with who we truly are. Chapter 4. Carl Jung's approach to healing shame. Now that we have explored where shame comes from and the challenges in releasing it, it is time to look at a pathway for healing. One of the most profound approaches comes from Carl Jung, who devoted his life to understanding the human psyche and how we can integrate the parts of ourselves that we have hidden or rejected. Jung believed that the key to personal growth and emotional freedom lies in facing what he called the shadow. The shadow is made up of the parts of ourselves that we deny, ignore, or judge. Often the very aspects where shame lives. Jung's approach is not about forcing yourself to be better or fixed. It is about awareness, acceptance, and integration. He believed that we cannot truly grow without acknowledging the parts of ourselves that we have hidden, because until they are conscious, they exert an unconscious influence over our thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. As he said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Bringing these unconscious elements into awareness allows us to see them clearly, understand them, and ultimately release the power they hold over us. One of the most practical ways Jung suggested for exploring the shadow is through self-reflection and journaling. Writing down your thoughts, feelings, and memories can help you connect with the parts of yourself that have been buried under shame. It creates a safe space to express what you have avoided, to name what you have hidden, and to speak to yourself with honesty and compassion. You might write letters to your younger self, acknowledging the pain you experienced, validating your feelings, and offering the kindness that may have been missing at the time. This process is not about reliving trauma, but about meeting yourself where you are and creating a dialogue that fosters understanding. Another technique Jung recommended is active imagination. This involves exploring inner experiences as if they were real interactions within your mind. You might imagine a conversation with the part of yourself that feels ashamed, listening without judgment, asking questions, and allowing it to express what it has carried for years. Active imagination is a way to bring unconscious feelings to the surface in a controlled, intentional, and safe manner. Over time, this practice helps reduce the intensity of shame and allows the shadow to become a part of your conscious self. The goal of Jungian shadow work is integration, not elimination. It is not about trying to erase shame or pretend it never existed. It is about recognizing that the parts of ourselves we have hidden or judged are still part of us, and by accepting them, we become more whole. Integration reduces self-condemnation because we no longer need to fight or suppress parts of ourselves. We begin to see that even our perceived flaws and vulnerabilities have value. They carry lessons, wisdom, and the potential for growth. Jung also emphasized the concept of individuation, the process of moving toward a more authentic and complete self. Individuation is the journey of becoming who you truly are by embracing all aspects of yourself, including those that have been rejected or shamed. When we integrate the shadow and accept our inner conflicts, we are no longer driven solely by unconscious patterns or old wounds. Instead, we can make conscious choices, respond rather than react, and live with greater freedom and self-awareness. It is important to remember that this work is gradual and ongoing. Shadow work and healing shame are not about quick fixes or overnight transformation. They are about creating a lifelong relationship with yourself, one that includes understanding, acceptance, and curiosity. Some days may feel easier, and some may feel more challenging. Setbacks are part of the process, and they do not mean failure. They mean that you are encountering something meaningful and that real change is taking place beneath the surface. By approaching shame with Jung's methods, through reflection, active imagination, journaling, and integration, we begin to reclaim parts of ourselves that have long been hidden. We learn to meet ourselves with compassion rather than judgment. We start to see that shame is not the truth about who we are. It is a story we learned, and now we can begin to rewrite it with awareness and choice. Ultimately, Jung's approach teaches us that healing shame is not about erasing it, but about embracing it with understanding. By facing the shadow, we transform it from something that controls us into a source of insight and strength. We create space for self-awareness, authenticity, and emotional freedom. And through this work, we can begin to live more fully, more freely, and more aligned with the truth of who we are. Chapter 5. Release toxic shame in 5 practical steps. Now that we understand what shame is, where it comes from, and how Jungian shadow work can help us begin to face it, the next step is learning practical ways to release it. Releasing toxic shame is not about quick fixes or forcing yourself to feel better immediately. It is about creating a gentle, consistent practice that allows you to notice, understand, and transform the ways shame operates in your life. These steps are about reclaiming your sense of self and learning to meet your inner world with compassion and awareness. The first step is awareness. Awareness is the foundation of healing. It is the act of noticing when shame arises, observing it without judgment, and recognizing that the feelings are separate from who you are. This may sound simple, but it can be surprisingly difficult. Shame often operates unconsciously, influencing your thoughts and behaviors before you even realize it. Start by paying attention to moments when you feel small, inadequate, or self-critical. Notice the physical sensations in your body, the thoughts that arise, and the situations that trigger these feelings. Awareness is not about changing anything yet. It is about shining a light on what has been hidden. The second step is inner dialogue. Once you notice shame, it is important to respond with kindness, not criticism. One of the most powerful practices is journaling, or guided reflection. Write down your thoughts and feelings, and speak to yourself as you would to a compassionate friend. You can also write to your younger self, acknowledging the pain you experienced, validating your emotions, and offering the understanding that may have been missing at the time. This step is about creating a safe space within yourself to explore the parts that have been wounded. Over time, this dialogue helps to soften the harsh inner critic and replace it with empathy and understanding. The third step is reframing beliefs. Shame is built on false messages we absorbed, often in childhood. These messages can feel like truth, but they are not. Begin to question the beliefs that tell you you are flawed, unworthy, or inadequate. Ask yourself, is this really true? What evidence do I have? How would I speak to a friend if they felt this way? Then, intentionally replace those toxic beliefs with statements that are compassionate, honest, and empowering. This does not mean ignoring mistakes or denying challenges. It means choosing to respond to yourself with understanding rather than judgment. The fourth step is integration. Integration is about accepting the parts of yourself that you have hidden or rejected. Shame often makes us feel that certain aspects of who we are unacceptable, so we push them away. But the truth is that these parts are simply human, and they are part of your whole self. By acknowledging and embracing them, you reduce the power shame has over you. Integration allows you to live with greater balance, self-respect, and authenticity. It is the difference between trying to be someone you are not and allowing yourself to exist fully, with both strengths and vulnerabilities. The fifth step is seeking support. Healing shame can be challenging to do alone. Therapy, counseling, support groups, or mentors can provide guidance, perspective, and a safe space to process your feelings. Sharing your experiences, even in small ways, can reduce the intensity of shame and create a sense of connection that is deeply healing. Remember, seeking support is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of courage and self-care. These steps are interconnected. Awareness allows you to notice. Shame, inner dialogue, helps you respond with compassion. Reframing beliefs transforms the stories you tell yourself. Integration allows you to accept all parts of who you are. And support gives you the strength and perspective to continue the journey. Together, they create a pathway to release toxic shame gradually, intentionally, and with care. It is also important to remember that this process takes time. Healing is rarely linear. There will be moments when shame resurfaces, when old patterns feel strong, or when progress seems slow. These moments do not mean failure. They are a natural part of the process. Each time you notice shame, respond with kindness, and practice these steps, you are making meaningful progress. Over time, the weight of shame becomes lighter, and the space within yourself grows larger. Releasing toxic shame is ultimately about reclaiming your life. It is about creating the inner conditions to live freely, authentically, and with self-respect. By practicing awareness, dialogue, reframing, integration, and seeking support, you are actively choosing to step out of the unconscious patterns that have shaped your life and into a conscious, self-aware way of being. This work may be challenging, but it is also deeply rewarding. Every small step you take toward understanding and compassion brings you closer to freedom, clarity, and the authentic self you have always carried within you. Chapter 6. Integration and Self-Compassion. Once we begin to release shame and practice the steps to transform it, the next crucial phase is integration. The process of bringing all parts of ourselves into awareness and learning to live with them fully. Integration is not about perfection. or becoming someone we are not. It is about embracing every part of ourselves, including the aspects we once hid or judged. These are the parts that shame often makes us fear, criticize, or deny. When we integrate them, we stop fighting against ourselves and start creating harmony within. Integration begins with awareness, but it deepens with self-compassion. Shame thrives in judgment. It grows stronger when we criticize ourselves for feeling inadequate, when we blame ourselves for past mistakes, or when we think we should already be over it. The first act of integration is choosing a different approach, choosing to meet yourself with kindness, curiosity, and understanding. This is not about ignoring challenges or pretending everything is perfect. It is about acknowledging the difficulty, honoring your experience, and speaking to yourself as you would speak to someone you deeply care about. Daily practices of self-compassion can be incredibly grounding. You might take a few minutes each morning or evening to check in with your inner world. Ask yourself how you are feeling, what thoughts are running through your mind, and how you can respond with gentleness rather than judgment. Journaling can be a powerful tool here, allowing you to notice patterns, explore emotions, and offer words of kindness to yourself. Over time, these small acts of awareness and care become habits that reinforce your sense of wholeness. Another key aspect of integration is recognizing that triggers will continue to appear. Even after significant work with shame, situations in life can awaken old feelings of inadequacy or fear. Integration is not about avoiding these moments or pretending they don't affect us. It is about responding consciously when they arise. Instead of reacting automatically with self-criticism or withdrawal, we can pause, observe the feelings, and remind ourselves that these emotions are echoes of the past, not truths about our present selves. Each time we respond in this way, we reinforce a new pattern of conscious, compassionate living. Integration also involves embracing the parts of ourselves that we have long rejected. These may be qualities, desires, or emotions that were deemed unacceptable in childhood. Anger, sadness, vulnerability, creativity, or ambition. Shame often taught us that these aspects were dangerous or unworthy, but in reality, they are simply human. By accepting them, we reduce the power shame has over us. We begin to understand that even our perceived flaws carry meaning, wisdom, and potential for growth. These hidden parts, once feared or suppressed, can become allies that enrich our lives. Self-compassion and integration are deeply connected. When we treat ourselves with kindness, we create the inner conditions necessary to hold our shadow with acceptance. We learn to respond to ourselves with patience, understanding, and care. And as we integrate, we notice subtle shifts, a sense of calm where there was tension, clarity where there was confusion, and a growing confidence that we are enough as we are. Integration allows us to live fully, without constantly defending against or hiding from ourselves. Finally, integration is an ongoing journey. It is not a destination or a fixed state. Life will continue to present challenges, triggers, and moments of vulnerability. The work is to keep returning to awareness, compassion, and acceptance, gently reinforcing the connection with your whole self. Each day, each moment, each small act of self-compassion strengthens your ability to live authentically and reduces the influence of shame. Embracing your whole self is ultimately liberating. It is a radical act of self-recognition, a choice to see and honor all parts of you, not just the parts that were approved or accepted in childhood. When you integrate your shadow, nurture your inner self with compassion, and respond consciously to triggers, you step into a life of wholeness, resilience, and freedom. This is the bridge between releasing shame and moving into true self-awareness, a bridge that allows you to walk forward with clarity, courage, and the understanding that every part of you matters and belongs. Chapter 7. Moving from shame to self-awareness. Once we have begun to face shame, explore our triggers, practice shadow work, and take practical steps to release it, the next step is perhaps the most transformative, moving from shame to self-awareness. This is the point in the journey where the heavy weight we have carried begins to shift, where the voice that once told us we were not enough becomes quieter, and where we start to truly see ourselves. Self-awareness is the conscious recognition of our thoughts, feelings, and patterns. It is the ability to notice when old habits are operating and to understand why we react the way we do. Moving from shame to self-awareness means recognizing that shame has been a lens through which we interpreted the world and ourselves, and choosing to look through a clearer, more compassionate lens. It means realizing that the critical voice inside us is not the ultimate truth. It is a story we learned long ago, and now we can begin to rewrite that story with conscious choice. This transformation is gradual and subtle. It is not about suddenly feeling perfect or free from self-criticism. Instead, it begins with small moments of recognition. Maybe you notice that a familiar feeling of unworthiness arises, but instead of immediately believing it, you pause and observe it. You acknowledge it without judgment, and you remind yourself that it is a pattern rooted in the past, not the present. These small acts of awareness are powerful. They create space between your inner experience and your automatic reactions. Over time, that space grows, and with it, your freedom to respond consciously rather than react unconsciously. As self-awareness deepens, several changes begin to take shape. Emotional resilience grows because you are no longer at the mercy of old patterns. You can experience difficult feelings without being overwhelmed by them. Inner freedom expands because the shame that once dictated your choices loses its grip. You may also notice an increase in creativity, curiosity, and authenticity. When you are not constantly defending against shame, you have more energy to explore, to create, and to express yourself in ways that feel true to who you are. Another powerful aspect of moving into self-awareness is understanding your inner conflicts. We all carry parts of ourselves that feel contradictory: vulnerability and strength, fear and courage, doubt and ambition. Shame often amplifies these conflicts, making one side feel unacceptable. Through self-awareness, we begin to see these conflicts not as problems, but as opportunities for growth. We learn to hold multiple parts of ourselves at once, to accept complexity, and to act with integrity even when we feel uncertain. This process also opens the door to compassion, both for ourselves and for others. When we understand the ways shame has shaped our inner world, we begin to recognize that everyone carries hidden burdens and patterns. Self-awareness allows us to respond to ourselves and others with empathy rather than judgment. It transforms the way we relate to the world because it is grounded not in fear or defensiveness, but in understanding and presence. It is important to remember that moving from shame to self-awareness is ongoing. Healing is not a straight line. There will be times when old patterns resurface, when shame returns unexpectedly, or when we feel stuck. These moments are not failures. They are reminders that growth is happening beneath the surface. Each time we notice shame and respond with awareness, we strengthen our ability to live consciously. Each moment of recognition, no matter how small, is a step toward lasting freedom. Ultimately, moving from shame to self-awareness is about reclaiming your life. It is about choosing to observe your inner world with curiosity, kindness, and honesty. It is about realizing that you are not defined by the shame you carried, but by the conscious choices you make in response to it. By cultivating awareness, compassion, and acceptance, you create the conditions for genuine transformation, a life that is not dictated by fear, judgment, or past wounds, but guided by understanding, authenticity, and freedom. This is the heart of the journey. From unconscious shame to conscious self-awareness, from carrying burdens you never asked for to living with clarity, strength, and compassion. The path is not easy, but every step forward is an act of courage. And with each step, you move closer to the truest version of yourself, the self that has always been there, waiting to be seen, embraced, and set free. As we close this journey, I want to leave you with one simple truth. You are not defined by the shame you carry. Shame may have shaped your story, but it is not the author of who you are becoming. The fact that you've stayed with me through this conversation tells me something about you. You're ready. You're ready to see yourself with new eyes, to question old beliefs, and to begin choosing compassion over criticism. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That is what this work is about. It's not about fixing yourself because you were never broken. It's about peeling away the layers of shame and guilt that were placed on you, often long before you had a chance to understand. Underneath all of that is a self that is whole, capable, and deeply worthy of love and respect. Moving forward, you don't need to do everything at once. Start small. Maybe today you notice when the inner critic shows up. Maybe tomorrow you write one kind sentence to your younger self. Maybe this week you pause when shame arises and remind yourself, this feeling is not the truth of who I am. Healing doesn't demand perfection. It asks only for presence. And if this resonated with you, I invite you to take one more step. Share in the comments what stood out for you, or what part of this journey feels most personal right now. When we give language to these experiences, we take away shame's power to stay hidden. And by sharing, we remind ourselves that none of us are alone in this. So carry this with you. You are allowed to let go of what no longer belongs to you. You are allowed to meet yourself with compassion, and you are allowed to step into a life that feels lighter, freer, and more authentic. This is your shame detox. This is your path to self-awareness, and it begins the moment you choose to see yourself differently. I hope this video was helpful. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts or experiences. Thanks for watching.